Having 8K and a mirrorless hybrid camera is no doubt really cool, but what's even cooler is when PotatoJet sends you the footage to color grade from a camera he got from Sony. Lucky? In case you don't know who I am, my name is Davinci Resolve, and I'm a colorist and one of the founders of CinemaGrade, a color grading plugin that makes color grading super fast and easy. So you might be wondering, what is my impression of grading footage from the Sony A1? Well, first off, 8K and even 4K in the H.265 codec is very taxing on most systems. So you'll definitely want to keep that in mind, even if you have a computer that's like flexing a big bicep. You'll still want to render or transcode the footage to get real-time playback in 8K. But honestly, who even has an 8K monitor? Onto the color of this camera, one thing we learned is if you record in 8K, the best you'll get is 420 color sampling. If you record in 4K, you get 422. So that is a trade-off when recording in 8K, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal because it's not a difference that you can actually see. Why you'd want the 422 is if you were keying a green screen or doing precise secondary corrections with HSL qualifiers. Now on to grading this. We received footage captured with two color profiles, S-Log3, S-Gamut3, and S-Cinetone. S-Log3 is the color profile you're most likely familiar with, and S-Cinetone is Sony's newer color science that's closer to a Rec. 709 color space, but with a more cinematic look. But right out of the gate, I'm gonna tell you to ditch S-Cinetone. Why? Well, if you look at these two images, one shot in S-Log3, the other in S-Cinetone, you can see right away that S-Cinetone has clipping in the highlights. I mean, the whole reason we shoot log in the first place, besides to show how amazing our before and after is to get more dynamic range. S-Log3 captures the highest dynamic range that the camera is capable of, and I'd only suggest shooting in S-Tone if you're on a tight time schedule or you don't want to mess around with S-Log. Now, in terms of how we would grade this, we can use a LUT, a color space transform, or just do it manually. Let's see how this looks in your software. In Davinci Resolve, we can add the color space transform effect and choose the corresponding color space and gamma. This gives us a good starting point that we can further refine with an S-curve and some hue and saturation adjustments. In Premiere Pro, we found that the free Cinecolor S-Log3 LUT from Gnome Kroll works really well with the Sony A1, only needing minimal adjustment. And in Final Cut Pro 10, we can also apply the built-in S-Log3 LUT to get a similar starting point like we had in Davinci, and then just add a little more contrast and color. Finally, we found that the Sony A1 graded beautifully going all manual. We found the following a simple workflow of adding contrast first, adjusting the pivot, fine-tuning the detail in the shadows and highlights, and finishing off with a pop of color really made Dylan the star in PotatoJet's short film. I've shown this in CinemaGrade, but the same workflow applies in your software. So what are my final thoughts? Well, probably the thing that stood out to me the most is how sharp this camera is and the low noise in the shadows. Generally, when you shoot in low light and bring up the shadows, you introduce a lot of noise, but not so much with this sensor. I would have to say that Sony has done a really good job with their newest sensor and their latest color science. I would like to see higher chroma sampling just to get that cinema quality badge, but the 420 honestly isn't a deal breaker for me, especially if you can use an external recorder like an Atomos. It's not been since the first mini DV camera in the 90s that I actually owned a Sony, but with the new flagship A1, I'm definitely making eyes with you, Sony. Oh, this was so much fun. Big shout out to Gene from PotatoJet for allowing us to have this opportunity to grade footage from the A1. To see his full review, click the video card and be sure to subscribe to PotatoJet's channel, as Gene is my favorite personality for reviewing gear. Have an awesome day.